Good evening, and thanks for joining me. I'm Joe Carbonetta, and this is Arroyo Live. This program is produced by and through the facilities of Pasadena Media to help enrich our community through informative and meaningful conversation. Remember, you can share your questions or comments with us anytime at arroyolive@pasadenamedia.org. Tonight, a special episode. Against the backdrop of an historic second impeachment trial of Donald Trump, we celebrate Black History Month. The vision of Harvard-trained historian Carter G. Woodson and Minister Jesse E. Moorland, as part of their founding of the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, it is a time for acknowledging the trials, honoring the achievements, and recognizing the central role African Americans have and continue to play in the history of this great nation. Woodson and Moorland originally selected the second week in February as the beginning of their commemoration, to coincide with the birthdays of Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. Since 1976, every U.S. president has designated the month of February Black History Month. Joining me in conversation will be Pixie Boyden, co-host of the Black History Parade, Delano Yarborough, a Black History Parade committee member, and Michael Mims, also a Black History Parade committee member and a photographer. Stay with us as we highlight the celebration of Black history in Pasadena, here on Arroyo Live. And again, thank you all for joining me this evening. Let's get right into the conversation. The first question, of course, is what is the agenda for the celebration of Black History Month in Pasadena this year?
One of the agendas for this year really is to make sure that we are still engaging our community around the historical and celebratory efforts that we have, even though we can't get together as a physical, in a physical context. We won't have the parade, but we have plenty of other things this year that we're going to be working on. Even, supporting Black businesses starting at the beginning of the month. We've also, actually this evening, we're having a absolutely great webinar conversation with the health department around the COVID vaccinations and getting information out to the community, in addition to having a culminating activity for the end of the month, which is kind of a dance party, online virtual dance party. And on the day that we would have normally actually had our wonderful parade, we are actually enjoying a drive-in movie down at the Rose Bowl at 6 p.m. We're going to be watching Selma. So this is really to engage our community, to ensure that they know that we still are very prideful in our heritage and still have plenty of things to share, even though we're doing it virtually.
And thanks to COVID, there won't be a parade this year, but does that really affect the overall feeling of this celebratory month, or do you think that you have found ways to get around
found a way with this new technology that we have by the videos and so forth? It's like everything else. You try to keep your tradition going and flourishing, and that this may bring in new people from around the country, not only just here, but around the country. To tune in on us. And it's very important that when you have a thing like the COVID we have, you have to make adjustments. And, I have a saying that's hanging here in my office that says, we may not be able to control the wind, but we can adjust our sails. And so we just adjusted our sails and decided to go another direction. And hopefully that it's going to work for us. And next year, when we have our 40th, we'll be ready for it.
You brought up an interesting point in that you said you want to maintain the history. That brings me to another question. I was wondering if someone would speak a little bit about the history of the Black History Parade here in Pasadena.
This obviously was something that started, and those historians on this session, please make sure you correct me. Christine Harris, we've been doing this for so many years, 40 years. And so, and I know that there were other individuals who started the Black History Parade many years ago, but it's been a wonderful labor of love to ensure that we are enriching and uplifting, bringing the historical context of what African Americans have meant to the city of Pasadena to the community for each generation as we've gone along. And I know Del and Mr. Mims have also had very specific experiences with the Black History Parade from probably their early years. Would you not say that, gentlemen?
That's true. It kind of evolved around the notion that there was a little emphasis placed on the contributions of Blacks to the whole Pasadena scene. And so an attempt was made to kind of correct that and to fill that void that was there with the absence of any attention being given to those contributions. And so the Black History Parade was one of the ways that was thought that could start that whole process and to highlight the contributions that Blacks had made to the whole Pasadena area.
As we noted at the top of the show, each of you is directly connected to the Black History Parade, but I was hoping to ask each of you in turn, and Pixie, I guess we'll start with you. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about how you came to be personally involved in the committee. You know,
individuals in my age group were saying, why do we need to go to the parade? What do we need to be involved with the Black History Parade for? And I think my participation at that time really did help bring a lot of clarity and information exchange between the two groups and such that we were able to start talking about some of the things that happened in the past that has now shaped our current circumstance here in the city of Pasadena. And so I was pleasantly surprised to be co-hosting with two other individuals who honestly, Roland Bynum and the Smile Lady, both of us, all three of us, proved to be a really interesting kind of act. We love it. And considering that, for us, it was something that we were easily able to do as we were getting scripts and looking at the entries coming down, being so involved in Pasadena. It was so simple just to talk about who it was that was presenting in front of us because we all knew them so effectively. And so I really wanted to make sure that I was not just not getting involved for the sake of getting involved, but really learning more about, how the parade has come to be and why it's so important to ensure that our community knows where we came from so we know where we're going.
Okay. Michael, can I pose the same question to you next?
I was volunteered by Dale. He called and asked me, did I want to be a part of this and to get in touch with Pixie? And of course, I said yes. Only thing I do in my retirement is look busy. So I said, okay. And so my involvement was not so much the parade itself, but it was post-parade. Because I had been involved with the changing roles, which you'll see a part of that today in the video. Because the Historical Society had contacted my family, and because my mom was very instrumental in a lot of things going on in Pasadena. First Black PTA president, Red Cross, you name it, NAACP, she was involved. So we said, my brothers and I said, yes, we'll do this. And so we started researching, and as I noticed that her involvement in the community was far-reaching. And so then this kind of stimulated me to go further than just the family. And I reached out to the community and I started amassing all this information about the different community events, people, places, and things. And so I had this information, and then it occurred to me one day, well, why not just put them on a board? And you can see one of the boards behind me here. And then post it there in front of St. Barnabas, which is my church. And so that people that at the parade, because they were coming to Jackie Robinson's park, they could see the historical part. they could see the actual photographs and learn some of the history that went on, in the early days. And so it just kind of grew from there. And I became known as the Northwest historian, more or less. And fortunately, I've been around long enough that a lot of those older people I knew personally, like the Prince family, the Moore family, the McAfee family, all these older people that as a kid growing up here, I knew who they were, and I knew them personally and went to school with their children. And so that's just kind of stimulated me to continue the mission. And so when I'm called upon, I try to serve the community like my mom did. Mm-hmm.
That's certainly a wonderful thing. And Delano, can we ask you also to tell us about your involvement and how you came to be involved?
My first involvement, I was principal of Elliott Middle School, and we had a band that participated in the parade. And at that time, the city was contracting the staging to an outside firm. And after 2 years of seeing what they were doing and the amount of money that they were charging to actually stage it, I suggested to the committee that we could do that rather than pay someone to do it, that members of the committee could actually do the staging. And so we did the first year with a lot of errors, but we reached a point where we saw that the members of the committee could actually do the staging without having to pay thousands of dollars to an outside firm to actually do it. And so from that point on, I became involved and actually went up and kind of participated in the staging, which started at Charles White Park in Altadena. And the parade proceeded down Fair Oaks to Mountain Street here in Pasadena. And so we eliminated the cost of paying an outside firm to actually do the staging up at really is Ventura and Fair Oaks, where the parade actually started. They went over to Charles White Park. And so from that point on, I've been involved ever since.
All right. And I noticed each of you have mentioned the committees in your response. How large is the committee for the Black History Parade?
It varies from year to year, but it can get up to as many as 35 or 40 people, depending upon how you classify the people that are involved that eventually are labeled committee members, because there are some that are not involved in the weekly or the ongoing meetings, but they volunteer to do jobs that need to be performed. For example, usually there is a breakfast for the dignitaries before the parade. And so there's a need for people to be there to help supervise and to facilitate the serving, the preparation for that particular event. And so they only come for that particular activity, but they're still considered to be part of the committee. But then there are others, about 20 to 25 people that meet periodically on an ongoing basis to actually plan and decide the content and the activities that are going to occur during the Black History Parade events.
That's a good point, because I know that, for every person who actually goes to the committee meeting, there's got to be at least 5 to maybe 10 other people who's helping to support whatever activity those are. So there's so many other people that we, as Del mentioned, before, that we don't necessarily even see on a regular basis, because they're helping to support the goals and the mission of the work to ensure a successful and positive parade and celebration. And it can be very varied in terms of how many people come per year to each of the committee meetings. But I have to say that the community as a whole really does wrap themselves around this. When people, as Mr. Mims mentioned, when called upon, he wants to serve. I think that becomes a lot of the mentality and force behind driving some of the goals for the work that we do to ensure that this is a successful event.
And certainly there must be a lot of work involved in making this event a reality every year.
It is. And there are some people
I see everybody laughing here. I'm not sure.
Yeah, there are some people that have been involved since the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So over the 40-year period.
Yeah. And it is a labor of love. I will say it that way. I mean, as much of the work that is needed to be done, everyone wants a really positive, polished production of an activity. So people put in the time. People put in the time like it is a little bit more than a part-time job on some level to make sure that we have everything that we need to do the work that we need to get done in order to have the things that we're doing. This year, it seems like, oh, well, everyone will take a break because it's virtual, so there's not as much work. It's just as much work to produce something virtually as it is to produce something in person. I almost would dare to say maybe even a little bit more, because there's more coordination that has to happen, especially when you can't physically get together. Those meetings are very supportive to help pass things off or pass information or even tangible things to the next group to do. But when you can't meet in person, I think it's even a little bit more work. Hours and hours of work, and people work, tirelessly to make sure that this works and happens for us in the community.
Well, and I'd like to touch on something that you just mentioned. You sort of tongue-in-cheek referred to it as more than just a part-time job. I think it's worth noting that all of the contributing members here do this in addition to their daily work. Is that correct? This is not something that you get to devote exclusively your time to?
Well, I'll speak for me. I very much actually have a couple jobs, but and in addition to that, but I wouldn't give up any one of those items to not do this work. I mean, I would want to do this work for the community, for us as a whole, to make sure that we have some representation. We're here in the city. We've done many things, have contributed many ways, and that should be celebrated year after year after year to make sure that our next generations do not lose sight of why we gather and why we meet and what our historical significance has been to the city of Pasadena and with the city of Pasadena.
And that must place its own stresses on every member of the committee. The realization of the importance of conveying that history for subsequent generations. Is that correct?
And that brings up the point. Michael's involvement. He has been recommended for the last 3 years to be involved, to emphasize a little bit more of the history of Blacks in Pasadena, in addition to the activities that take place. Because there are a lot of young people that don't know about the history of Blacks in Pasadena. In fact, there are a lot of seniors that don't know that much about the history of Blacks in Pasadena. And so it was an attempt to get him involved, and with the volumes of material that he has, that we could begin, and on the 40th, we could really do a good job of emphasizing the importance of highlighting the history of Blacks around 3 areas: people, events, and places, and how those 3 areas could be used to demonstrate the history of Blacks in Pasadena and the roles that individuals have played that are significant.
Well, I was fortunate enough to have access to a lot of records that my mom had and she kept. And I'm still going through a lot of information from the church, First AME Church. She was involved there as an official. And it's just something that just sort of happened. And I said, this needs to be brought out to the public. And I have another friend who's grandfather, Anderson, was here in the early days. He was here shortly after the Prince family. It was the first Black family. And he has volumes of information that will be good for the next years, for the 40th anniversary. There's things that I didn't even know about. And he's kept his whole family records. And so I'm continuing to research and dig and so forth. And fortunately enough, as being a photographer, I was able to attend a lot of the social events and the community events and photograph the various happenings. I called it the rubber chicken circuit. So I had to go to these meetings, the Kiwanis Club and this club and that club. It got to the point where I would just go and eat a hamburger before I went there. Then I wouldn't be hungry and so forth. But it was interesting. And I got a chance to meet a lot of people and be involved in the community and know what was going on. And so that was my impetus to continue my mission.
Well, you mentioned the potential lack of awareness in the current generations about Black history in Pasadena. I wonder, is there a place that someone can go today to learn about these things? Is there a dedicated place, besides doing research and, of course, your local public libraries, but something that really details the experience in Pasadena?
Probably the Historical Society would have a lot of information there, because that's where quite a bit of my information came from. But this is something that we're looking at, I think, towards the future, to have some place where you can go and you can find this information, not only about the community, but maybe about your own family and so forth. And so this is something I think down the line that maybe we're going to, because I know my family has been telling me, why don't you put this on a disc and make it available and so forth. And it's always you can do it, but no help. but anyway, so at least it started now. I have it started now with the help of this committee and so forth. So we'll see where it goes. And I tell them all that you got to get me while I still remember it. Because if I get hit in the head, I might not remember anything.
I think it's a good question, because as we're talking about, is there a central place where anyone can go to get some of this? And I think, unfortunately, there is no central place, but we are fortunate enough to have these jewels, like Mr. Mims and the Historical Society and many, many others, Mr. Yarborough, and plenty of other people in this community who have this history, who know, and are willing to pass it down to the next generation, so that they also know and we don't forget. Of course, everyone's experience is going to be, very different, but depending on what decade or era you grew up in. And so it still is something that's important to us, and we value enough to make sure that our grandkids know what it was like in the late 1800s, the early 1900s, when stores moved, when freeways came through and changed, dynamics of the culture of the community. Why do people live in certain pockets of the community versus others? That's the kind of historical context that people really do need to know as they move forward to build better communities.
Well, certainly a centralized place where one can go to learn about all of these interesting facets would be something to look forward to. And I hope that there is movement in that direction in the coming years. A moment ago, we were talking about all of the work that goes into the celebration each year. And with that in mind, this year, there are 3 videos that have been produced. And I'd like to take a little time to talk about those. Perhaps you can tell us a little bit about what will be in those and all of the work that went into those videos and how we'll be able to view them this year.
Absolutely. We have had the most fortunate opportunity to do a collection of photo montage, if you will, with narration Mr. Mims and Mr. Yarborough, plenty of others. We have plenty of other individuals from NAACP as well. Gary Moody, who's also one of the narrators for the first film. So the first one really takes a look at some historical context, some people, places, and events that have happened over the years within the context of Black history within Pasadena. And so we have been able to also be able to capitalize on the fact that we've had a video once before. 1984, there was a video produced. It was called The Changing Rose. And so we were fortunate enough to be able to revisit that video and start taking a look at where our current state is as of today. We've gotten some really awesome both then and now kind of photos of what the corner looked like in 1950s to what it looks like today, 1940s even, and what it looks like today. And so that's kind of the first video that we're putting together. It will be produced and be available and at the Pasadena Media. We'll be showing it next week, as a matter of fact. The second two videos, which are also pretty awesome in my opinion, will be a collection from Alfred Hayward, who is a photographer here locally in Alfred Hammond, a photographer in Pasadena, who's actually captured a lot of the Black History Parade events over the years. And so one of those videos will be taking a look back at the previous Pasadena parades, Black History parades, and kind of getting a sense of what it was like. So for all of those of us who are really going to miss this parade this year because we can't have it due to COVID, we'll have a way to really look back at some of the highlights of the last two parades and, get a sense of nostalgia, I'm sure. Whereas the third video will also be a review of Black experiences within the context of Pasadena over the last year. And there's been many things that have transpired and wonderful highs and lows, even in the face of COVID. And so we'll be putting that together also as well. So that we're able to really kind of give an experiential of what this last year has kind of been like for everyone. And all of them will be shown on the Pasadena Media Station as well, and Arroyo Station, in addition to starting next week.
Do either of you gentlemen have anything that you'd like to add as far as those videos are concerned?
Well, for some reason, I decided that I wanted to document some of the buildings, especially on Fair Oaks, that were being torn down. And so I decided to one day just get up, and I went down and I photographed it. And sure enough, it was torn down, and now it's just a freeway entrance exit and so forth at what we call the Point. And that was at Lincoln and Fair Oaks. And there was a place there called the Green Buck, which was a little restaurant, and everybody ate there pretty much. It was a hub, and businesses, and how the businesses were destroyed by the freeway or the redevelopment of Fair Oaks Avenue. My uncle had a barber shop, a beauty shop, and his residence, and that was just level for a playing field and so forth. So I just decided I wanted to document this for some unknown reason, and I'm glad I did now. So
me too.
Thank you.
I think the videos will also serve as a launching pad for what we can do for the 40th, so that we do a much more comprehensive review of Black history in Pasadena and some of the events and things that happened that affected the situation that caused us to be where we are today. One of the hats that I've worn that many people don't know, that haven't been in Pasadena long enough. For 7 years, I directed the Pasadena City Schools desegregation program, and that's where I got my education. Pasadena was the first school district outside of the South to be court ordered to desegregate. And as a result of that court order, it still has an effect on the school system even today. But there are a lot of things that came about as a result of that court order, and the communities fight against desegregating the schools. And so there's a lot of history built around that that needs to be made known and documented for the public view.
Well, we are fortunate enough to have a sneak peek at those videos this evening. So we're going to take a look at those right now, and we'll be back right after that.
According to archives kept by the St. Barnabas Episcopal Church, the African Americans who came to the Los Angeles area did not find a ready welcome in the Episcopal churches. St. Barnabas Church itself was founded in 1923 by 8 women. Among them were Ellen Steen Bevins, Rosebud Mims, and Georgia Weatherton, in whose home on Delmar Street the first services were held. In early 1930s, the Dobbins family donated the present property located on 1062 North Fair Oaks Avenue, and Mr. and Mrs. Thomas Fleming made a gift of the current sanctuary. The parish hall was a wood frame building already located at the site. Dr. Edna Griffin. The building located at 891 North Fair Oaks Avenue served as the first location of Dr. Edna L. Griffin's medical offices. Dr. Edna L. Griffin, 1905 to 1992. Dr. Griffin started her higher level education at Philander Smith College and continued her education at the Meharry Medical School located in Nashville. Dr. Griffin considered pursuing her medical education at USC, but was informed by officials that the university did not accept blacks into its medical school program. She interned at John Andrew Hospital in Tuskegee, Alabama, and practiced briefly at the Evansville, Indiana.
Prior to going to the videos, we began to touch on this already, but I wanted to ask the question again, just to make sure there wasn't more information. What was the idea or the reasoning behind the creation of these documentaries and videos?
Well, I think it was really to make sure that we have provided some context for our community to have a sense of purpose and place and history. You know, we're not alone. We've never been alone. We've always been here in the city of Pasadena, and I think our community really needs to have an opportunity to connect to that entire concept of what it's been like as an African American person coming up, growing up, supporting, providing, living, working within the context of the city of Pasadena.
And I think the question that you raised earlier about, is there a central place where you can go and get information? That place doesn't exist. And so the videos can provide one opportunity for information to be made available, not just during Black History Month, but that can be made available at other times during the year for people who might have an interest. And so we wanted to have that available so that it wouldn't be limited to only just February. And so the schools, for example, could also utilize the information that we hope to put together as we make the package more comprehensive and more inclusive.
That's right.
I was wondering if each of you might take an opportunity or take this opportunity to perhaps share some of the personal experiences that you may have had that coincide with some of the events mentioned in these documentaries. And I don't want to pick anyone to go first, so whoever feels comfortable, I would love to for you to share your insights. I'd love to hear about them.
I have many, but one that I really think about is that as I ended up in a career in photography, as I went through the school system at John Muir High School before it had changed into it was a 644 plan in those days. And so it was only 11th and 12th grade. Well, for 2 years, I tried to get into the photography program. And for whatever reason, I was not allowed to get in the program. It was either full or I didn't have it wasn't at the right time. It was always some excuse. And so I continued on and on my own, more or less. And then as I went through and I got turned on, I worked at Chandler School for a while, and I used to take all the photographs there at Chandler School. And one day they asked me would I teach photography to the students, a couple of students. Well, that was 4 students. They wanted to start what they call a mini program. And I said, okay. And I said, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I never turned down an opportunity. Because if the door opens, you should go in. You can always get out, but you can't always get in. So I did. And I had a friend that was doing photography, and I got some help from him. And so I started with these 4 students, and it was successful to a degree. And so I decided I would go back to school, PCC, take classes. And I ended up, from there, I went into the graphic department and learned the graphic arts and learned the technology of film and the developers and stuff like that. And so then I was convinced by one of my professors that I should go on to get my degree and so forth, which I did. And the long story short is that the counselor that I had at Muir, she retired. And guess who she had to come to? She's going to travel, and she needed to learn how to take film, slide film on her trip. And I was the only one that taught that class. And so this is many years after. But I got my revenge. I don't know if she recalled who I was or whatever, but that was one of my highlights, that you don't give up and you pursue your dreams. And no matter what it takes, you keep going. And you run into the walls, but the walls aren't that tall that they can't be taken care of. And so that's my one experience that I remember, but there's been a lot more. And like I say, my mom always taught us all to be who we are and do the best you can when you can. And so that's what I've lived by.
And I think I can look at some of the pictures related to then and now. And during my beginning years of teaching in the Pasadena Unified School District, which started at McKinley Junior High School at that time, a lot of my students lived south of Colorado. And the redevelopment program kind of wiped out that whole area as far as the Black residential area, which was centered around Friendship Baptist Church. And as the changes took place, it not only affected a school that used to be located where the Vons supermarket is on California, but also a school that was located where the post office is on Lincoln. Those were sites for elementary schools when I first started teaching. And so the desegregation program and the redevelopment program combined to change the landscape as far as the location of predominantly Black neighborhoods and the location of businesses, schools that were predominantly Black. And so when you look at the events that have occurred and how they affected the Black community, I think we can begin to see the pictures that could be used to represent some of those changes from a visual point of view.
I think I probably connect a lot with the stories. This year's collection of pictures were very eye-opening and instrumental in terms of looking at the rich history of African Americans in the city of Pasadena, and the struggles that many prior to me had to endure in order for me to have some of the luxuries and freedoms within the context of a city that I do have. So for me, it was connecting to the stories. I personally loved them all. I wish we could have done 100 more, and we will do 100 more, I'm sure. And I won't put it all on you, Mr. Mims, but we will do more stories because, you know, I recall while I haven't been here obviously as long as Mr. Mims and Mr. Yarborough in the city of Pasadena. You know, there are things that I recall that weren't there that are there now, and things that were there that aren't there now. And so as I look to my children and for them to have the experience of what their world was like, I want to be able to share these same exact stories so that they have a context for the city for which they were born in, and they should know, you know, what their history is fully contributing and how they are contributing to that history as they're moving forward. So I love the stories. I thought, you know, while very disappointed that we couldn't have a parade this year, I felt like this was an awesome opportunity to create, to show our innovation with technology, to be able to produce something that is equally as worthwhile as the parade. But we're still going to have the parade, hopefully next year.
Well, and Pixie, I think you already answered what would have been my next question, in that you had noted there have been videos or documentaries produced in the past, but it has not been a regular occurrence with the parade and celebration. But it looks like moving forward, this will be something that you try to incorporate into the annual production. That's fair to say?
I think that's a very fair statement. With this COVID reboot, as I call it, we're having to now think about, we can't go back to the way it was before. There's just no way of doing that. You know, I mean, we have a new normal now, and our new normal has provided us an awesome opportunity to bridge roads that were not necessarily there, and new pathways that were not necessarily there before. And so Mr. Mims, I think, said it before, maybe Mr. Yarborough said it, you know, having the opportunity to reach an audience that not necessarily here, even locally, you know, people who may have lived in Pasadena but now are living elsewhere, still have that same sense of pride and be able to get that rich history because we're able to do something virtually. So I'm fully encouraging some continued structure that bridges the in-person with the virtual experience as we kind of move forward. Now, I may not win, but, you know, I still think those two things have to intersect at some point or another.
Well, and certainly these documentaries present an opportunity to reach as you point out, a much wider audience, because I'm assuming these will also be placed on social media sites such as, you know, everybody's aware of YouTube, and they will be there available forever. So people can research them at any time. Is that correct? That is.
Yeah. It is the plan to have something that we have a long-standing video history, if you will, of experiences of people, places, and events, so that we don't lose this as our loved ones are transitioning into retirement, so to speak, and, you know, moving on with new facets of their lives. We want to make sure that this information is available for all generations moving forward, as we are creating, documenting, narrating our experiences.
Well, that in itself is a wonderful thing, and perhaps a bright spot in, you know, caused by the, as you put it, COVID reboot. So I'm certainly glad to hear that is happening. We have touched on several times the fact that there is not currently a central location where someone can go and research all of this information. Well, that leads to another interesting question. Where are these archives currently being stored?
Mr. Mims' house. Mr. Mims' house. Actually, it's a good question, because I think that's part of the work that we were really talking about before, is documenting everything that people have. There are so many families who've been in Pasadena for such a long time who have experiences, histories that they have localized. So Mr. Mims was talking earlier about he inherited the information from his mom. And she was obviously a great keeper of history for her family, for things that happened, things that she was interested in, and things that really came through for the city of Pasadena for us. But, you know, and while I love Mr. Mims, we all can't go over to his house and create a museum in his backyard. So
I was going to suggest maybe we should consider doing that. There are loads of points of historical interest in the city of Pasadena as it is. Perhaps we should have his home designated a national landmark monument.
I live with a bunch of hoarders.
Well, I think that this becomes that conversation. We got to figure out where we're going to put things and how we move it forward.
Fortunately enough, when I was into photography, I built my own office and darkroom behind the garage, and that's where I store my stuff. And you have to be invited to come in here.
See, and I don't think we're getting that.
If you need to do some research and want to know something, you have to call me first. And then I will give you an invitation. But no, I think by making this available on CD or whatever the platform is going to be, this will be easy to distribute throughout it for anyone that needs it. And, but I'm more than willing to share it. You just can't have the originals.
Yes.
And there are also tidbits of information that's scattered around Pasadena. The Star News has some information. The Pasadena Historical Museum has information. There's a little bit of information in the Pasadena NACP office. The school district has some information. The Pasadena Library, Central Library, La Pintoresca libraries have information. So there are tidbits of information that's scattered around. What needs to happen is for it to be located and find a way of pulling it together and placing it in some central location or making it available, more readily available to the entire community.
Is there a way that we can get something started if it's not already in progress? Because this is definitely an important matter and something that needs to be preserved. How would people go about finding out more information or getting involved?
Well, normally I would have said the Northwest Programs Office, but that no longer exists as we once knew it in the past. To actually go through the Jackie Robinson Center, the best way. We love individuals who want to participate and volunteer their time and their energy and their expertise. So Jackie Robinson Center makes a really great central point at this time for that. I think as we were talking about having central place, this is an awesome opportunity for potential City of Pasadena partnership to emerge out of this work where we can find, locate, and designate some central repository space for this information to live in perpetuity moving forward.
The City of Pasadena, Kenny James is actually the contact person for items or information related to the Black History Parade Committee. He is the person.
I would like to ask if there's a place where one can donate not only their time, but perhaps monies if they are so moved to help in creating this centralized location. Is there any anything set up to do that at the moment, or is that something that really should be considered perhaps by the powers that be within the city?
That exists. There isn't a Pasadena Black History Parade Committee structure in and of itself, but the Human Services Department has a nonprofit where persons that are interested in donating or contributing to the Black History Parade activities can do so through that avenue. And so Kenny James, again, would be the person, along with Lola Osborne.
Okay.
And persons who make contributions can actually get tax write-offs because of the nonprofit status.
Okay, that's certainly very valuable information also. But the folks that you just mentioned, how would somebody go about contacting them? Where would they go to contact them?
They are both city employees within the City Department of Human Services.
Okay, so that sounds like a good place to start there, then would be the Department of Human Services within the city of Pasadena.
Yeah, their offices are located on Fair Oaks in the Jackie Robinson Center in itself. So anyone who's interested in learning more, being a part more, connecting more to the activities and the work of the Black History Parade Committee or activities and events are always free to call, and I was going to say drop by, nobody drops by anymore, but to call or email or reach out to Kenny James or Lola Osborne through the city of Pasadena over at the Jackie Robinson Center as well.
Well, that is wonderful information. I certainly do appreciate that because, as we all know, most action begins with direction, and a little bit of direction can go a long way. So I'm proud that we can help in conveying that information. We are coming near the end of our show. We do still have a few minutes left, but I would also like to take this opportunity to ask each of you this question. What are you the most proud of, and what do you see as Pasadena's shining moment for African Americans and Black history?
Good question. Mr. Mims, Mr. Yarborough?
Yeah, well, there's a lot, but for me personally, I guess it was my tenure that I taught at Pasadena City College. That's probably one of my favorite goals and that I've succeeded in. And as I tell people, I went from the broom to the dark room. And and I think I served my students well because I have students now. I have one that's now teaching over at Lackawanna High School. And some of them, in spite of me, have been successful. And so I feel good about that. And in terms of Pasadena, I don't know. I think getting the pool open was one thing because my mom, she was on that committee along with Dr. Griffin and Ruby Williams, Mr. Edson, and all those old timers that fought hard, John Wright, and all those people. So that was a struggle, but they made it. They didn't give up. And so I would put those two as my favorites at this point in time. There are others, and then there's some that I'm not so proud of, but I won't talk about those.
I think to me, it's been the evolution of the city's leadership that has moved from being non-responsive to a position where they listen and are responsive. And as a result, there needs to be more interaction with that leadership by the leaders within the Black community so that problem solving can take place. Because as with most entities, we're dealing with problems that, for the most part, are unique to the leadership generally, and they have no solutions to those problems. And by working together, they'll be able to learn a little bit more about the realities of what the problems are, and then to come together to see if reasonable and rational solutions can be found. And I think the city leadership is now open to that.
I think while we've made significant strides, obviously, since, in decades, I think, Pasadena's shining moment has yet to be realized yet. I am so proud that our city has shifted their mindset in such that we're open to conversations around change in real meaningful ways today. That means something for the next generations, an acknowledgement of policies that may not necessarily have worked or are not working now that we need to address and look forward to, maybe making some changes in that context. But I do think I'm very hopeful, very pridefully hopeful that our city will embrace the voices of younger generations and their experiences and take effective change to make things better for those to come.
Okay, certainly understandable that there is a lot of good, but there is always work to be done, always room for improvement. Very quickly, in the last minute or two that we have left, I was hoping to get your impressions, favorite moments of the parade or producing the parade from each of you. And Pixie, I guess we'll go in reverse. So if I could start with you on this one.
Favorite moments. So I've had so many, being a host of the parade on Parade Route Day. My co-hosts are hilarious, and our side jokes are unparalleled to any other comedy show I've ever been a part of. But I have to honestly say that, and that keeps you going for the whole entire parade. My favorite moments of the parade, honestly, was seeing our middle school bands, oh my gosh, together. That was really important, I think, for me, seeing the motorcycle clubs represented, seeing the social clubs, the sororities, the fraternities, all of these groups connected and being able to be represented within the city. And I think we even had that particular year, we had someone from as far away as San Diego who was participating in the parade that year. I was in awe that we hit San Diego's radar somehow, and that it was important enough to them to drive from San Diego to Pasadena to be a part of our parade. And so all of those things actually have to be my favorite moment. That year was definitely my favorite year. I think that was 19.
Okay. Delano, can we ask you the same question? Favorite, your impressions of favorite moments in the parade?
My favorite moment was when we successfully were able to save the city the money by actually staging the parade with volunteers rather than having a paid contract to do it.
Okay. And Michael, yours as well?
Well, I guess mine was when my daughter was chosen by the Sickle Cell Foundation to represent the foundation in that Black Parade. And she was suffering from sickle cell, but fortunately enough, she was able to get a bone marrow transplant from her brother and is sickle cell free. So, but at that time, that was one of my highlights.
That is certainly a wonderful story and wonderful news. And we thank you for sharing that with us. This, of course, brings us to the close of our show. We're out of time. I would like to thank Miss Pixie Boyden, Mr. Delano Yarborough, and Mr. Michael Mims for joining me this evening.
Our pleasure. Definitely.
Thanks for having us.
If there are topics you would like to see addressed in our discussions, you can email them to us at arroyolive@pasadenamedia.org, and we may include them in a future broadcast. Until next time, this has been Arroyo Live. I'm Joe Carbonetta. Thank you for watching, and good night.